Hello, my lovelies. It's Mrs. Kitson, and today we are going to cover our carbon unit. We're going to spend a whole unit on just one single element on the periodic table. So we're going to cover lesson 2 right now in this video. So if I go to lesson 203, I click on my pancake button, I click on learn, and I go to the lesson introduction. That's always the fun part. Page 1, if I make that bigger, you can see here a lovely picture. It says raw diamonds. Diamonds before they have been cut and polished look very different from diamonds you might see in jewelry. Diamonds are a solid form of pure carbon. What do diamonds have in common with people? How is carbon different? Now I'm down here. How is carbon different than the other 3 elements that are the most prevalent in living things? Hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. So if you're a note taker, that's a good one to write down. The 3, or I should say the 4 elements that are the most prevalent in living things are hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and then of course carbon, which we are discussing today. So let's take a look at this interesting table. This table is called Comparing Element Bonds. We have in the first column the elements listed. In the second column it says typical maximum number of bonds formed with atoms of the same element. So hydrogen atoms can form 1 bond. Oxygen atoms can form 1 bond with other oxygen atoms, but they can typically form 2 bonds if it's some other element from the periodic table. Nitrogen can form 1 bond with another nitrogen atom, but if nitrogen is bonding with other elements from the periodic table, it can form 3 bonds. And carbon, which is really our purpose for today, our topic of conversation for today, carbon can form 4 bonds with another atom of carbon, and it can form 4 bonds with any other or most other elements on the periodic table. So that's interesting. It says here, compare number of bonds to the same element. Carbon can form the most bonds with other carbon atoms. And this here, compare number of total bonds. Carbon can bond to up to 4 other carbon atoms, while most other elements can only bond to 1 other atom of the same type. That's this column here. Carbon can bond to up to 4 carbon atoms, while most other elements can only bond to 1 other atom of the same type. Page 2 of the lesson introduction says carbon atoms are the building blocks of life. Look closely at your skin. Go ahead, give it a poke. Have you ever wondered what it's made of? How about your hair, your tongue, your eyes? If you were to keep this list growing, it would not change the fact that a single element, carbon, plays a role in all of those structures. Carbon atoms have 4 valence electrons that bond readily to other atoms to form these things called organic compounds. And that is going to be our focus today in lesson 203 and also in lesson 204. So I go back up to my pancake button, and now I've finished with the lesson introduction. I'm going to click on Explore Carbon and Life, and it'll take me to page 1. Let me get rid of that, make the page bigger. Click on to page 2. Organic compounds contain carbon. Okay, that's great. What's an organic compound? I see a link down here. I'm going to click on it. It says an organic compound is any chemical compound that contains carbon bonded to at least 1 other atom, usually hydrogen. Okay, so organic compounds contain carbon. We know that now. Think about the iridescent feathers of a peacock, the rough bark of a tree, the deadly venom of king cobra, and the soft skin of a baby. All of those things are matter, and all matter is made of the atoms of elements. How many different elements would have to combine to produce the huge variety of characteristics of all living things on Earth? Every element in the periodic table. The striking truth is that when it comes to living things, only a small handful of elements come into play. In the vast theater of life, one element in particular is a celebrity: carbon. Carbon atoms are the building blocks of every molecule that is essential to life. carbon-based molecules that are present in living things are called organic compounds. The term organic compound was first used to describe substances that came directly from living things. Then, a scientist was able to synthesize one of those substances in a lab. Today, the term organic compound applies to any compound that contains carbon-hydrogen bonds. Atoms bond to become more stable. Atoms have electrons that orbit a nucleus, and the electrons move in different levels. Here's a twist. Each level can only hold a certain number of electrons. Hydrogen and helium, for example, can hold a maximum of 2 electrons in their outer level. You can see here, I just built a hydrogen atom. It's got 1 proton in the center, and it's got 1 electron in its outer energy level. Notice I have 1 proton and 1 electron making a neutral atom, no charge. 1 proton, 1 electron. If I put together helium, the second element on the periodic table, atomic number 2, I have 2 protons. That means it gets 2 electrons, and you can see both of those electrons exist here in this first energy level outside of the nucleus of the atom. Most other atoms, though, can hold up to 8 valence electrons. Remember, those valence electrons are the electrons in the outermost energy level. Hydrogen and helium only can hold 2, that's all they need. But when you get further up in the periodic table, for example, lithium, right? Lithium can hold 7 more in this outer energy level. We keep going, beryllium, right? It's got 2 electrons in its outer energy level. Boron is going to have 3 electrons in its outermost energy level. Carbon is going to have 4 electrons, 1, 2, 3, 4, in its outermost energy level. I'm going to move them and put them where I think they belong. There we go. Nitrogen can have 5 electrons in its outer energy level. Oxygen gets 6 electrons in its outer energy level. Fluorine gets 7 electrons in its outer energy level. And neon can hold 8 electrons in its outer energy level. Yes, neon has a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 electrons because it has 10 protons. But in that outer energy level, there are only 8 electrons. That's all it can hold. An atom is not stable until its outer level contains the maximum number of electrons. If the outer level of an atom holds fewer than the maximum number of electrons, the atom will undergo changes until its outer level is full. Then the atom is more stable. Carbon has unique bonding abilities. When you were younger, did you have a set of building blocks? If so, you probably remember certain blocks you always started with. You used them to build the base of your structure, and you connected all of the other blocks to them. Carbon is like those base building blocks. Carbon has 4 valence electrons, so it has 4 available spaces in its outer level for bonding. Carbon can easily form 4 covalent bonds with other atoms, including carbon atoms. So let's take a look at that. So I want to show you what carbon looks like and why it is so unique. We'll build carbon. It's going to have 6 protons and 6 electrons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's spread them out. There we go. All right, so you can see we've got our 6 electrons placed in our carbon atom. 2 of them are in the inner ring, right? And only 4 are in the outer ring. 1, 2, 3, 4. A single carbon atom can bond covalently with 4 hydrogen atoms at each of these 4 spots, right? to form a methane molecule. So if we build that methane molecule, methane is CH4. Put my carbon in the middle. Remember, carbon has 4 valence electrons. So at each of these spots, a hydrogen atom could come in and bond. And so I'll bring in 1 hydrogen atom, 2 hydrogen atoms, 3 hydrogen atoms, and 4 hydrogen atoms. If we look at that in a 3D model, you can see in the space-filling model, you have the large carbon atom in the middle, and then the 4 tiny little hydrogen atoms on the outside. Ball and stick model, we have the carbon atom in the middle, and we have the 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 hydrogen atoms on the outside. Each one of these sticks represents a shared pair of electrons, and where those sticks are stuck into the carbon atom, that is each bonding point on the carbon atom. What you can take note of in the space-filling model is that hydrogen only has 1 empty space for bonding for valence electrons. And I can show you that here. If I reset this, make hydrogen, right, atomic number 1 on the periodic table, it has 1 valence electron. So this is the only spot, right, where something can come in and bond with hydrogen. Scientists have different ways of showing the structure of atoms and the chemical compounds they form. In the methane atom, CH4, each black line represents the pair of electrons that are shared between the central carbon atom and the hydrogen atoms in each hydrogen bond. In the carbon dioxide molecule, CO2, the carbon atom shares 2 valence electrons with each oxygen atom, and each oxygen atom shares 2 valence electrons with the carbon atom. The double lines in the model represent the 2 pairs of shared electrons. So here's a pair, here's a pair, here's a pair, and here's a pair. You can also see that in our space-filling model in the lesson with CO2. Let me put my carbon dioxide together. Carbon dioxide. Now it's carbon monoxide because there's only 1 oxygen. We'll make it carbon dioxide. The di means 2. Let's take a look at the 3D model, and you can see here is our carbon dioxide. We've got a carbon atom in the middle, 1, 2 oxygens on the outside. Carbon atom in the middle, 2 oxygens surrounding that carbon atom. In the ball and stick model, you can see the carbon on the inside. Here it is, right here. Oxygen, oxygen, 1 shared pair of electrons, 2 shared pairs of electrons, 3 shared pairs, 4 shared pairs. So in a ball and stick model, each stick represents 2 electrons that are being shared. Let's turn that around so we can see it in 3D. And that is what carbon dioxide looks like. Carbon can bond to form different shaped molecules. Because carbon has 4 valence electrons, it can bond easily with other atoms. It can also bond with other carbon atoms. This makes it particularly suited for forming many different molecules. Those molecules can take several shapes. In these examples, the first structure is called a straight chain. The second structure is a branched chain. The third structure is a ring. Carbon atoms have bonded with each other to form these molecules. You can see carbon bonded to carbon, to carbon, to carbon. You've got a branched chain here. You've got 3 carbons bonded to each other in a row, and then this carbon branching off. And then you have a ring structure, carbon, carbon, bonded to carbon, bonded to carbon, bonded to carbon, bonded to carbon. And remember, each line represents a pair of electrons, 2 electrons being shared. 4 large carbon-based molecules, known as macromolecules, are present in all living things: carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. A macromolecule is a large molecule, especially applied to carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. And we are going to spend quite a bit of time talking about those 4 large carbon-based molecules known as macromolecules later on in this unit. What I want to do before we move on to the next page, I want to build these molecules, or as many of these molecules as I can for you, because I want you to see that the straight chain carbon compounds aren't necessarily straight. So let's put, they only give us 3 carbons here. Let's see if we have more. There's 4 carbons, 4 carbons, 3 carbons. I want to have a bunch of carbons to put together. All right, so I'm limited to 4 carbons, right? So let's put 4 carbons together. There's 1. Remember, each one has 1, 2, 3, 4 places where it can bond because there are 4 valence electrons. So there's 1, there's 2, there's 3. We're going to make that straight chain molecule of carbons. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Now remember, each carbon can bond 4 times. Like it has 4 spots, right, where some other atom can come in and bond. So this carbon only has 1 space taken up. It's bonded right here. So it's still got 1, 2, 3 places where something else could come in and bond. So we'll stick a hydrogen. We'll just use hydrogens for now. And there we go. This carbon here, carbon number 2, is bonded in 1 place, 2 places, but it's not bonded in the top and it's not bonded at the bottom. So we'll stick a hydrogen there and a hydrogen there. Remember, each carbon can have 4 things stuck to it. Carbon number 3 has 2 things stuck to it. It's stuck to this carbon over here, and it has this carbon stuck to it as well. So I've got 2 more spots. 1, 2. And then this carbon over here is only got 1 of its spaces filled, right? It's only stuck to this carbon to its left. So I've got 1, 2, 3 more spaces. 1, 2, 3. So this compound is called N-butane, and its formula would be CH4, C4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's C4H, and let's count them up. We'll start right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it would be C4H10. So let's take a look at the ball and stick model of this element, or this compound. And I want to show you, it kind of looks like a sea dragon. Let's see if I can get it to turn. There we go. Now what I want to show you is the 4 carbon atoms in the center chain. 1, 2, 3, 4. Notice they're not exactly straight, right? They kind of zigzag. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's because of where the electrons end up on the outside of the carbon atom. So just keep in mind that even though, right, when you build it, it looks straight, in real life, it's not necessarily straight. There's 1 carbon, 2 carbons, 3 carbons, 4 carbons. You can see those 2 center carbons, right? These 2 guys here in the middle, they each have 2 hydrogens stuck to them. So there's 2 hydrogens stuck to that guy and 2 hydrogens stuck to that guy. And then the carbons on the end, they each have 1, 2, 3 hydrogens bonded to them. Here's the carbon on the other end, 1, 2, 3 hydrogens bonded. So here's carbon on the left. It's got 1, 2, 3 hydrogens. Carbon on the right has 1, 2, 3 hydrogens. Keep in mind, every stick represents 2 electrons, and they're being shared between the 2 atoms. Here's the space filling model. That's what we like to call it. Looks like a cute little caterpillar. We've got the big 1, 2, 3, 4 carbon atoms in the middle, and then the hydrogens coming off. So here's the left carbon with 1, 2, 3 hydrogens on it. Here's the right carbon with 1, 2, 3 hydrogens on it. And in the middle, here's carbon number 2 with 1, 2 hydrogens. And here's carbon number 3 with 1, 2 hydrogens coming off of it. So just wanted you to see that when you take those hydrogens and you put them together, they don't necessarily in 3D in real life form a straight line like you saw in this picture here. Okay, so imagine they zigzag up, down, just like that. Carbon is present in carbohydrates. Your body is made of carbon-based molecules, which are used in many ways. Much of the food you eat is made of carbon compounds, Plants, for example, contain a lot of carbohydrates, and all carbohydrates contain carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms that are bonded together by valence electrons. You can see a carbon, carbon, oxygen, carbon, oxygen, carbon, oxygen, carbon, and then a whole bunch of hydrogens as well. You can see those three elements in the word. Carbohydrate, carbo for carbon, HYD for hydrogen, and then anytime you see ATE added to the name of a compound, that's telling you that oxygen is present in that compound. Potatoes are loaded with carbohydrates called starch. Each starch molecule is made up of many smaller carbohydrates, each of which is called glucose. Glucose is one example of a carbohydrate. Rice, bread, pasta, French fries, any plant-based food contains carbohydrates. When you eat foods that contain carbohydrates, your body uses a complex process to turn the carbohydrates into useful energy. Carbon is also present in lipids. Lipids is another word for fat. You may have a negative association with the word fat, but without fats you couldn't function. Every cell in your body is surrounded by a membrane made mostly of fats. Your nerves are insulated with fats. Your body stores extra energy in the form of fat. A basic unit of many lipids is the molecule glycerol, which contains a chain of carbon atoms. Carbon's unique bonding ability makes it ideal for bonding with other carbon atoms. The thick layer of fat under the skin of some animals is called blubber. Blubber not only stores energy, but it also serves as insulation and conserves body heat. Carbon is present in proteins. Many structures in your body are made of or contain proteins, and proteins are made of molecules called amino acids. Amino acids are present in muscle tissue, hair, blood, digestive enzymes, and many other parts of your body. Alanine is just one example of an amino acid. Carbon atoms are at the center of all amino acids. Finally, carbon is present in nucleic acids. Your genetic material, the material in your body that determines the color of your eyes and hair, your bone structure, and so forth, is made of molecules called nucleic acids. Nucleic acids are one of the 4 major classes of large organic molecules, which are important in storing, transmitting, and making useful the information necessary for the processes of life. There are 2 basic types of nucleic acids, and I think you may have heard of them: deoxyribonucleic acid, better known as DNA, and ribonucleic acid, better known as RNA. Molecules like adenine, which contain carbon, are an important part of the structure of DNA and RNA. Carbon exists in many forms on Earth. There are close to 10 million known carbon compounds in the universe. Most are found in living organisms, but some carbon compounds are the result of dead and decaying organisms. Such compounds include fossil fuels like natural gas, coal, and oil. Carbon monoxide is a poisonous gas that is emitted when those fuels burn. A valuable diamond is made of pure carbon, as is the graphite in an ordinary pencil. With its 4 valence electrons, carbon is able to bond in many ways to form both organic and inorganic compounds. Carbon atoms are recycled again and again in numerous ways. In conclusion, hint, hint, wink, wink, this makes for great help on your CRQ number 4. Carbon plays a central role in the molecules of all living things. Carbon has 4 valence electrons, but it needs 8 to be stable. With 4 available spaces for electrons in its outer shell, a carbon atom easily forms covalent bonds with common atoms like hydrogen and oxygen. This unique characteristic makes carbon extremely versatile, so it is often the base element or backbone in a chemical compound. Carbon is present in all molecules critical to living things: proteins, fats, carbohydrates, and nucleic acids. Carbon is also present in non-living things. Carbon atoms have 4 valence electrons that bond readily to other atoms to form organic compounds.